Hey, it's Drake Riggs, founder of Obsidian Wisdom. Welcome to another Retirement Readiness Thursday. Today, I have a treat for you. Today, we're going to talk about what we find when it comes to creating an income stream that allows us to separate our time from our money. And the reason that's important is because when you look at the numbers, whether you're talking about the tariffs or recession, or you're just talking about my wages aren't going up, the job that I would love to have, but they don't pay enough, I have kids and trips. The reality is you have to have some money that's coming in, and it doesn't have to be this big thing where we have to almost sell our soul. Because right, I'm often think of the Bible verse talks about what benefit would it be to gain the whole world if it costs you your soul. And then I think of it in reverse, where it's like, to buy my soul back, how much would I be willing to pay? What would I be willing to give? And you'd be like, man, I give everything. And it reminds us that there are certain goals that we actually have that are more important than the money. And so when you're thinking about planning, I believe that you need money to finance a lot of these visions that we have for ourselves, but we shouldn't sacrifice the vision, the core, the essence of who you are, whether it's your core values, your core principles, just how you see yourself to get the money. One of my favorite African proverbs that I mention all the time is wealth which enslaves the owner isn't wealth, right? Like ultimately, and I think of that, and I think of it a lot more lately, because you can think of it from the one sense where it's like, look, I'm giving, money, I'm getting money, but I've sacrificed my ethics, my values. Okay, that's one half of it. The other end of it could be, I'm getting the money, but I have to be quiet when things are said. Okay, you can't speak your mind because you'll be blacklisted or blackballed or something like that. You're like, okay, that there are levels to this idea where wealth which enslaves the owner isn't wealth, where you look at certain situations like, yeah, I don't think I want that. And there are multiple examples of that. So I want to go over, how do you generate multiple streams of income? How do you generate millions of dollars without having to sacrifice or stress out and worry about a lot of these things? And I believe that there's really a plan to achieve everything. If I said right now, hey, how would you go about creating a $50,000 a year lifestyle? Most of you could think, well, all right, well, you can get a trade, some kind of technical school, you work somewhere for a few years, you get your raise each year, boom, 50,000. If I said, hey, how would you go about creating $100,000 a year? You would probably say, well, you might have to go to college, and then there's a handful of degrees. You could be an engineer, and then you'll have, engineer, pharmacist, things like that. Boom, you're gonna have the six figures. If I said, hey, I want to make 250,000 a year, you'd say, well, that's probably going to put you in a rare air, but you most likely are going to have to be within like IT, finance, and probably healthcare. Those are most likely going to be the three industries. Not to say that there aren't more, but we're simply saying that we can recognize how to create these different results. But when you talk about what would someone do if they said, I want to make $1 million every single year. I want to have $1 million set aside in my bank account. How would I go about doing that? And then the question becomes a little bit more difficult to answer. So we're going to go over what that ultimately would look like. And hopefully you'll be like, yeah, that makes sense. And I got value from that. So I talk to people often because I love the idea of creating multiple streams of income. And it's not, you don't need 10 of them. You don't need 7 of them. The truth is you just need 3. The majority of millionaires, it says like 65% of self-made millionaires have at least 3 streams of income. And so that's ultimately the goal. When I make plans for people, or if I'm just talking to people, I'm like, look, 65%, they have 3 streams. And that's what we're going to go for. I believe the number is like 48% have 4 streams or more. And then I believe the number is like 32% has like 6 or more, 6 plus streams. Or maybe it's 5 plus streams. But you can see the number, it goes down. So the magic number is 3. So that's what we normally go after. And then the IRS says that they recognize 7 streams of income. For most of us will start with earned income. And the reason we do that is because economically, we have to trade something of value to get something else of value. And that in the beginning is our time. We trade our time and we receive the money. The goal is to eventually separate our money from our time. That is simply how I define retirement. I don't really put a number on it. You want to retire at 30, 40, 50, 60, 80. For me, it's not that big of a deal, the number. The idea is I'm separating my time from my money. How am I able to generate income that I no longer have to give my time for? Even when you're early in your career, if you were like, well, I want to be a doctor, well, you have to give 10 years of your life in med school, right? Like, so you know that that is going to be the trade-off to achieve that. You know that a lot of the jobs that we have early on, we get paid an hourly wage. So you have to go into that building or you have to drive that route, whatever that looks like. We have to do the thing with our time to receive the stuff, to receive the money back, and then we spend the money. So earned income is where we all start at. That's how we start building our experience. That's how we build leverage. We may go to college for 4 years. We may get an apprenticeship. We may get a certification. All of these are ways that we trade our money or our time to receive the money. And eventually we want to be able to have the money come without us having to give any more time. And like I said, that's how I define retirement. Well, if you have earned income, then you're going to have to start investing in other things. And that this is where the majority of people go. When you see the majority of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, it's because they have the earned income and then they spend the earned income on, everything, the entire lifestyle. But the reality is you're going to want to have a percentage. And normally I would say the goal is to get up to at least 20%. And the way that would work is you get paid Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. If you take your salary from Monday, that's 20%. So the Monday salary pays you, and then you can spend Tuesday through Friday. But if you take the Monday salary, pay yourself the 20%, that is how we get access to the other streams of income to get to the three. So the three assets that give you access to the other streams of income, you would take that 20% and then you will invest it in either real estate, you'll invest it in the stock market. So we'll say like stocks, we'll say real estate, or you're going to invest it in your own personal business. Right, I am struggling with that. So if you take the money and you have that 20%, you take Monday's salary and you start investing in these other streams of income, that is how you create the multiple streams. That is how, and I'm going to show you a case study, an example at the end where you can see how the numbers are very beneficial to us. And then when you're talking about having peace of mind, the reason that 70% of Americans are stressed about money, 70% of Americans aren't struggling with money. They're just stressed about money. So some are stressed because they don't have enough. Some are stressed because of the way that they get it. Some are stressed because of the job that they have, where we're all dealing with stress surrounding money. So we're got to figure out a way to have a little bit more peace of mind. All right, I gotta find a way to have some money. Like the joke in my house is, I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, look, I want to generate enough money in my sleep that you can't spend it while you're awake. And then she always laughs, and I genuinely feels like she's trying to challenge me. Like she is genuinely trying to beat me. That she genuinely is like, I am going to spend more awake than you can make when you're asleep. And I don't even sleep that much. I mean, goodness. So we'll have to figure that out. So you have your three streams of income, and then that opens, or your three assets. And then once you have three assets, that opens up the additional streams of income. And then you would decide which ones make the most sense for you. You don't have to have all of them, right? You already have one, and that's your earned income. So you're really just talking about, how do I get access to two more? And then I allow that money to make more money, and then it works for me. One of my favorite books that I remember when I was reading is like The Richest Man in Babylon. It has like 5 parables and talks about ways that you generate the income. And there's a bunch of different stories in there, and I try to read it to the girls periodically because I just think it has good lessons, and that is one of them. So if you were to invest in real estate, that would open you up to rental income, right? So you would receive whatever the monthly amount is. There is a rule of 1%. The rule of 1% just simply states that whatever the house is worth, or whatever it is, whatever it's worth, you should be able to charge 1% of that as your monthly rent. Now there's exceptions, of course, to everything, right? Like the idea that even if my house was only $40,000, let's say, and you'd be like, look, Trey, you're not going to find that. I understand. Just work with me. $40,000. Well, I can still charge more than 1% of that. And even if my house is $100 million, I probably can't charge 1% of that. And so there are extremes, but what we're saying is the majority of homes, it's the rule of 1%, which is, if my house is worth $300,000, I should be able to charge $3,000 a month in rent, right? That's the rule of 1%. If you were to sell that property, As long as you had it for a year and a day, that would generate capital gains. And capital gains is another stream of income. So you receive capital gains from any asset that you hold for a year and a day. So if you held stocks for a year and a day, that's capital gains. If you held a property for a year and a day, that would be capital gains. If you sold your business, that would be capital gains. That I have the capital, I invested in it, it grew in value, and I sold it. All right, cool. So that is considered capital gains, which is a much more favorable tax rate. That's why every time we get around election season, we talk about how Warren Buffett pays less than the secretary. It's because she has earned income and he has capital gains income. So it's just a different tax. It's a different tax rate. If you were to invest in your own personal business, then you would have profits from your business, which is just the revenue, which is how much I sold the items for, minus my cost, which is what it cost me to produce that item. You would take your profits. That's your revenue minus cost. If I was selling shirts, it would be like I sold shirts for 20 bucks. 20 bucks is my revenue. And then it cost me $10 to make the shirt. So it would be $10 would be my profit once you subtract them. The fifth one, and normally this is going to be, the rest would kind of be in the stock market. You have investment income, which we normally call dividend income. Man, I messed that up, but you see what I was doing there. That's dividend income. And it's just as it sounds. Dividend, for those that maybe it escapes your mind, a dividend is basically a business has a certain amount of profits that they generate, and more times than not, a business is going to reinvest in the company. There are some businesses that are like, dude, we got all the market share. There's not much to reinvest in the company. We still have billions of dollars left over. So we're going to share that profit with the shareholders. And you as a stockholder are a owner in that business. And so you'll receive a dividend to match that. Then number 6 would be interest income. And so we can be paid interest. Your bank pays you interest. You see that at the end of each year. They're like, hey, here's like 1% of the money that you had in there. That's them paying you interest. If you have a mortgage, you pay interest on the mortgage. If you have a car payment, you pay interest on your car payment. So we know that interest is something that we can pay and we can charge. If you borrow money, right? My kids know if they forget their money and we go out somewhere, they want to buy something, they know that when they pay us back, we charge interest to show them, hey, you need to be responsible. You need to bring your money with you, yada, yada, yada. And so they are aware of that as well. So that's what interest income ends up being. And then the 7th and final one is royalty income. And so the way royalty income works is that, actually went a little too far down. The way royalty income works is I have something that I made once. It could be a patent, it could be a song, a book, and I then allow someone to use my intellectual property. And then when they make a profit, they give me a portion of that profit. So if I took my music, as wonderful as my singing voice is, and I uploaded it to Spotify, Spotify would then regenerate some sort of money from every time someone pays them to download my song. And then they would send me a royalty. They'd be like, hey, thank you for allowing us to sell your song. We made a sale. Here's your royalty. And you can invest in companies in the stock market that have a good amount of royalty income, right? So like Star Wars and, National Geographics and all the Disney princesses, a lot of those are royalty contracts where Disney doesn't make the cups that you can buy the princess on. They license it out to someone. They said, hey, you want to be able to make a cup with our princesses? Sure, no problem. Just send us this royalty back. And so you're able to invest in businesses that generate royalties as well. And so these will be the 7 streams. From there, you basically say, all right, if I am investing that 20% and I invest in one of these 3 asset classes, or you can try to do multiple of them. It really depends on just how you feel in general. You can see that, all right, well, then I would just choose 2 of these. And so I would generate the money, and you could say, look, if I'm going to be in the stock market, I can invest in businesses that generate royalties, or I can just invest in businesses. And then and you can even invest in real estate investment trust. That's REITs. So whenever I say REITs, that's what it is. REIT is a real estate investment trust. I can invest in those. That would give me access to rental income technically. And a lot of the times, even Uncle Sam considers your returns from REITs rental income from a tax perspective. If you hold the stocks for a year and a day, then that's capital gains. If you invest in dividend paying companies, then that would be investment income. And then you would decide, right? You can have as many as you want, but 3 is the magic number. And from there, you're then able to, I believe, you start freeing yourself up where you start having a little bit more flexibility in the sense that there's a job that I want. It doesn't pay as much, but that's okay. Because I find that a lot of the time we're trying to get promoted because we want more money to afford our lifestyle. And we don't really care about being promoted. I mean, it's nice to be recognized, but for the most part, we're trying to get the money that comes with that. And if you're able to have your money that's separated from that, where you don't have to deal with the politics of the office and the fact that the person that's been there for 30 years and isn't going anywhere, so there's nowhere for you to go. When you have these other streams of income, it takes the load off. You don't have that type of stress to worry about. And then if you give yourself time in the market, it only works even more in your favor. And so those are going to be normally the income streams that we would go to. And so the way we normally describe it is it's like a 3-legged stool. And so those would be the 3 asset classes. Then we normally look at them and we see how it balances it out. And then we go from there. So business income, it could be active, right? Like a side business consulting, or it could be passive, equity in a company. For real estate, we already talked about it could be rentals, REITs, or we even get credit when we cut expenses. And the reason I say that is because I'm someone who always says, look, you can make more, you can spend less, or you can wait. And that all 3 of them generate more income for you. That a lot of the stress that we have around money is because of the time frame that we allow ourselves. If I need $1,000 today, it feels different than if I need $1,000, in December. I'm like, oh, okay, well, you're gonna spend $1,000 in December. All right, cool. I can take, whatever, $100 from each check or something like that. And you're like, all right, I feel less stress. I say that to say, if you downsize where you have a smaller mortgage or smaller monthly payment of mortgage or rent, and then you have the capital gains that you generate from that sale, that would count, right? So in real estate strategy, we talk about it where it's not just the money that I'm spending on it, it could be the money that I save on it. And so if I save money, then that can count as your real estate strategy. And then the market investments, we talked about those as well. Let me just see if there are any questions real quick. All right. Ronald, how are you, my friend? He said, hey, Dre, would dividends, interest, and passive guaranteed income count as income streams? Yes. Yes, they would. I probably said that a little loud. I got excited. They would definitely count. And so, right, in passive income stream, so it's like an annuity. And if you think of it, an annuity is a guaranteed or even a pension, right? They're both sort of the same thing. But at the end of the day, it's basically the insurance company has actuaries and they estimate how long everybody's going to live. And then they give a number to that firm. Hey, this is how much you have to pay to make this work. And if you had your own personal annuity, it's the same idea. They estimate how long you're going to live. And then they look at how much you want in income. And then they give you the number. This is how much you need to give us if you want this to work this way. And then they take that money and do what with it? They invest it in the stock market. Now, they would invest in relatively safe investments. And that's okay because that's the idea of those investments. So you normally aren't going to be overexposed in the market. There's going to be a lot of interest, a lot of cities, a lot of money market accounts, and a lot of what we call value companies, very large companies that generally speaking won't go anywhere, right? Like if I invest in Google, I don't expect Google to go anywhere, right? If I invest in Apple, AT&T, General Electric, I just don't expect them to go anywhere. Is it impossible? Of course, it's not impossible. I just generally speaking don't expect them to go anywhere. And so I would consider a pension and annuity. I actually, in my mind, I would think of them as investments in the stock market because they're basically buying stocks with that money, and then they give you a portion of the return as a guaranteed income in your annuity. So hopefully that makes sense. It's I don't mean to create a word salad, nothing like that, my friend. No, the questions are good, and so I appreciate you asking. So that definitely works. All right, hopefully I answer. Let me know if that makes sense. All right, so next we talk about like, hey, why does this work? And the reason that this works is because a lot of time when we're stressing about our investments, when we're up at night, it's because we're essentially gambling. Right? I'm not going to call anyone out, but it's the idea that if I was, oh, this is the next Amazon, and I put all my money in that company, I'm going to check on that company every single day because all my money is on that company. I need that company to work out. And in my humble opinion, that's pretty close to gambling, right? That's like going to Vegas and putting everything on black. And you're like, yes, spin the wheel and let's see what happens. This allows us to diversify. If you're choosing multiple streams of income, if you have something in real estate over here, something in stocks over there, you have your own business or your own earned income from your work, it gives you the ability to not be stressed about these other assets. Because we do know that there is a cycle and it goes up and it goes down and then it comes back. But if I have something else that's keeping me afloat, I don't need to worry about that. Right. And in the way that I would even sort of describe it is like if you were, let's say you're investing, right? And if you give 100% of your money to the market, then you're all in, right? You're like, hey, look, I had $100,000, I invested $100,000, I need this to work. Versus if you had, let's say, like you had $1 million, you put $100,000 in, well, that's only 10% of your money. Now, would you be mad if it was lost? Of course, you'd be mad. Would you be sad and frustrated? Of course, right? I mean, it is what it is. You worked hard, you earned that. But would you be devastated? Right? No. And why is that? Because it's only 10% of the money that I have, that I generate. And it's one of those things when we're talking about investing versus gambling, there's a lot of ways for me to be able to tell whether someone is investing or gambling, but sometimes that's one of them. It's like, hey, what percentage of the money are you comfortable with the idea of losing? Not that you would, but comfortable with the idea of losing. And I'm like, oh, I can't lose any of it. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, right, tell me more. And so you want to think of it that way, but at least this gives you the diversification. You spread it out. You have something that's good in every different economic climate through this, and I like that a lot. And so a lot of times most people overestimate just how hard it is from an emotional standpoint to be able to have some sort of an investment strategy that gives me peace of mind. And this is one of those that I think will help you to be able to do that. And so in many ways, I feel like, hey, you don't need new money. You just need to multiply the money. And that's why I'm trying to share the idea that, hey, if you're able to take 5%, 10%, 20%, and then you're able to put that in something else, you will see it. And I'll give you a quick example. So I will use a case study with the Robinsons. Let me scroll down. All right. So let's imagine our age doesn't ultimately matter as much, but let's say we're having a conversation like, hey, which of these asset classes are you most comfortable with? Right, like where you'd still be able to sleep at night, you'd be like, I can commit to this long term. I believe that this makes sense. What are you most comfortable with? And for some people, they will say, all right, sorry, so this was the Robinsons, and they say, what I will do is I will have a side hustle. I'm like, all right, cool. Where I just kind of do something on the weekends. I would consider that, right, business income. Now you're in business for yourself, and that's fine. And your asset might just be your car. If you're picking up and delivering things, your asset might be just the time that you're working on things, but I would consider a side hustle. You could do consulting, right? So not a lot of people, but there are a growing number of people that even as they retire, they like the idea of using the skills that they acquired over the years, and so they'll do consulting or something like that. And so then we'll say, you know, let's say like $1,500 a month, right? Nothing too crazy. I work on the weekends. It works out for me. Right, I have four weeks out of the year. I get like $300 every single weekend. And then this is what I have, $1,500 a month. You're like, all right, cool. Right. I think we would say, all right, that can work. And then you would say, all right, well, then what else would you have? And you say, well, from there, I was able to take that money. And then over time, I was able to have, right, my earned income if I'm still working. Or if you're retired and you have that amount of money, then you would say, at some point in time, I would then decided I wanted to expand. So you either would say I have my earned income and then I have this weekend money. Well, what would we do with that weekend money so that you can still afford more of your time? Because right now you're still working, you're still trading your time. You can say, all right, I'm going to invest in some sort of real estate project. And you could. And so for this one, and I know the real estate prices are so high. I mean, they really are. And I'm cool, right? I'm cool with that. I definitely understand. So let's say it was. Let's say it was $300,000. And then if you did $300,000, if you did 20% of that, I believe that's like 60,000 is 20%. So if I had the 1,500, or I should give myself an easier number, like I really should have. Say you have 1,500 after 10 months, that means you would have 15,000, then you have another 3,000. So that is $18,000 that I'll have each year. So I'm basically generating about $20,000 a year for my side business, which means in 3 years from the side, I would then have the $6,000 for a down payment on a home. It'd be $3,000. All right. And let's say that real estate project, after you have your mortgage and the rent and everything else is done, it's netting you $1,200 a month. Right. So now we're opening up. We're having the multiple streams. So I got my rental, I got my consulting, making it work. And then from there, we can say, all right, I have the right multiple streams coming in, and now I have more time. What am I going to do with my time? And then you can say, you know what? I'm going to start investing in the market. I'm just going to buy dividend paying stocks. So that's it. I'm just going to do dividend paying stocks. And depending on what the dividend is and things like that, but normally what we'll say is the rule of 1,000 is basically like every $1,000 a month that you want to generate from investments in the market, that is normally going to cost you somewhere around like $260,000. Like you normally have to be somewhere around there. Now, is it possible to have higher dividend paying stocks? Of course it is. Totally possible. Is it possible to have some that are lower than that? That's equally possible. And so we're saying that this is roughly where those numbers end up being around. And so if you were to then start taking the money that you're generating in your rental property, now some people will say, look, I like real estate. It works for me. I'm just going to get another real estate property. So I'm going to do it again. And so now, because I have my $20,000 here, and I have probably like $15,000 here, I now have $35,000 being generated between these two each year, which means now in 2 years, I have the $60,000 to buy another property. Because you see, I'm multiplying it, right? And we still haven't even counted, if you're older, we didn't count Social Security yet. If you're younger, we haven't even counted the earned income from the other 5 days a week yet. We're just counting the side hustle that we do on the weekends in the real estate project. And they're generating $30,000, $40,000 each year. And so you can see how it ends up multiplying very quickly. And so even if you have the dividend paying stocks and you wanted to have like $2,000 a month from this, well, based on the rule that we just said, that would be about $500,000. And while that feels like, man, that's a lot, Dre, right? Well, from these other projects, our real estate and our side hustle, we know that we're already generating about $30,000 to $40,000 a year. So yes, it would take a handful of years to achieve that in the market, but it doesn't change the fact that if I have it in dividend paying stocks, I actually keep the stocks. It's just the dividend. I keep the real estate. It's just the rental income. And then I can stop the side hustle. And so whether you said at this point, you're like, hey, I have one real estate property, I'm gonna get my next real estate property, and then I'm gonna cut the side hustle. I don't want to work anymore. You may be someone who enjoyed your side hustle. You may have enjoyed the consulting, which if you did, keep doing it. If you're gonna do it for free and someone's willing to pay you, take it. Right? That's the way I feel. It's okay to do it for free. It's okay to get paid to do it. I don't see an issue with either of them. But hopefully what you are able to recognize very quickly is it becomes where something that would take, if I just had an earned income and you took whatever the disposable income is, where you said, all right, I have the ability to take whatever, like the 20%, you can see how much longer that would take and how much more difficult it is. Versus when we start multiplying, you can also see, yeah, I can see why 65% of self-made millionaires have 3 streams of income. It becomes so difficult to not become a millionaire, because if you're investing in those asset classes to achieve those income streams, it's like the money just keeps growing. You could have a portfolio of houses, you have a portfolio of stocks. You can start now looking online and just purchasing a business, which I like, but everybody's not excited about owning businesses. But I like going online and you see the businesses, and then depending on the structure and where it's at and things like that, it opens up a lot of opportunity for you. But all of this started from just taking that 20% from earned income, investing in the three asset classes that then give us access to the other streams. And we didn't have to be crazy. We don't have to have 10 or 15 streams of income. We don't have to juggle that many plates. You just simply would choose the one asset class that works for you. And each asset class alone will open you up to the two streams, and then you'll have the three. And so you go from there. All right, I believe that is right. I believe that is it. All right. So in that particular case, it looks like they are now generating, what is that? It's like 5,000 a month, basically. They're generating like 5,000 a month. And that was relatively quickly. That within a handful of years, I know some people will be like, look, Dre, 10 years is a long time. And I appreciate it and I respect that, because 10 years is 10 years. But if I said how many people, if they wanted to, could retire, could separate their time from their money 10 years into their career, right? Start at 25, could you retire at 35? You're 35, you could retire at 45, right? You're 45, you could retire at 55. And most people would say, well, no, of course not. And that's the way I feel, right? It's like, it's almost like, in the way I would describe it is, if you saw $100 on the ground, would you walk by it like, it's just $100? No one cares about that. Of course not. You pick it up, you'd be excited. You'd probably call someone and be like, dude, I just found $100. It's my lucky day. When you talk about it from an investment perspective, people act like they just would walk past $100. And so hopefully you all, you're not in that group. All right. So as always, I'm thankful for the time that we have together. Hopefully this makes sense for you. And if it does, I appreciate if you like and share it. Until next time, hope you have an absolutely phenomenal weekend, right? And stay safe and enjoy life.